Nairobi never sleeps. Between the loud matatus, glowing city lights, and tiny apartment walls, Aisha Kamau had one simple rule: avoid drama. Then Brian Otieno moved in next door. He was loud, annoying, always smiling for no reason, and somehow always in her business. From noisy mornings and sarcastic arguments to stolen glances and late-night conversations, what started as pure irritation slowly became something neither of them expected. But love is never easy. Especially when pride, heartbreak, and dreams threaten to pull two stubborn hearts apart. In a city full of chaos, can two rivals learn that sometimes the person who ruins your peace becomes the reason your heart finally feels at home? Aisha Kamau loved quiet mornings. Every Saturday, she woke up early, made chai, and sat outside her small apartment in South B, Nairobi, to enjoy the peace before the city became loud. That morning was different. Bang. 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 Aisha almost spilled her tea. "Who is making all that noise this early?" she complained. She stood up and walked to the balcony. A moving truck was parked outside the apartment next door. Boxes were everywhere. A tall guy in a black hoodie was carrying furniture while giving orders to the movers. "No, the couch goes inside first," he said. The man removed his hoodie because of the heat. Aisha froze for a second. He was handsome. Very handsome. Then he looked up. Their eyes met. "Morning," he said casually. Aisha quickly looked away. "Morning," she replied. She hoped he would stop talking. Instead, he smiled. "I hope the noise isn't bothering you." "It is." The man laughed. "Well, good morning to you too." Aisha rolled her eyes and went back inside. She did not know then that this annoying neighbor was about to change her entire life. Later that afternoon, Aisha was carrying groceries upstairs when she heard footsteps behind her. "Need help?" the new neighbor asked. "No." "You always this friendly? You always this noisy?" He laughed again. That irritated her even more. "I'm Brian, by the way." "Aisha." "Nice to meet you, Aisha." She nodded and unlocked her door. Just before entering, Brian spoke again. "So, what do you do?" "I work." "Obviously." Aisha sighed. "I'm a graphic designer." Brian's eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Yes." "Why?" "I'm a photographer and content creator." "Oh. That means we're both creatives." "Congratulations." Then she shut the door. Brian stared at the closed door and laughed softly. "This girl hates me already." On Monday morning, Aisha went to her favorite coffee shop near her office. She ordered her usual. 1 vanilla latte and a chicken sandwich. "Coming right up," the waitress said. Aisha sat down and opened her laptop. 5 minutes later, someone pulled a chair opposite her. She looked up. "Brian. You're following me now?" she asked. Brian looked surprised. "I come here every morning." "Well, now you're ruining it." "Wow." Before he could reply, the waitress arrived. 1 vanilla latte and chicken sandwich. She placed the order in front of Brian. "That's mine," Aisha said. The waitress looked confused. "Oh no, sorry. We mixed up the orders." Brian grinned. "Looks like fate wants us to share breakfast." "Fate needs therapy." Brian burst into laughter. Several people turned to look at them. Aisha hated how easily he laughed. It made it difficult to stay annoyed with him. That afternoon, Aisha's boss called her into the office. "We just got a huge project," he announced. Aisha smiled. "What kind of project?" "A campaign for a new fashion brand in Nairobi." "That's amazing. There's one small issue." "What?" "We're collaborating with another creative team." Aisha nodded slowly. "So?" Her boss turned the computer screen toward her. A picture appeared. Brian. Aisha nearly choked. "You have got to be kidding me." The next day, Aisha walked into the conference room with a bad attitude. Brian was already there. "Look who it is," he said with a smile. Aisha sat far away from him. "I asked for professionalism," her boss warned. "We are professionals," Brian said. Aisha snorted. The meeting began. The fashion campaign needed photography, social media content, and graphic design. Unfortunately, Brian and Aisha had to work closely together. Very closely. After the meeting ended, Brian followed her outside. "You know, this could actually be fun. For you, maybe." "Come on, Aisha. You act like I killed your cat." "I don't even own a cat." "You know what I mean." Aisha stopped walking. "Listen carefully. I like peace, quiet, and organized people. You are loud, annoying, and always smiling for no reason." Brian crossed his arms. "And you're grumpy 24/7. Exactly. So let's just work and stay out of each other's way." Brian smiled. Impossible. Working together became a disaster. Brian loved bold colors and dramatic photos. Aisha preferred simple, elegant designs. Every meeting became an argument. "This font is boring," Brian complained. "This photo looks like a nightclub poster." "It's creative." "It's chaos." "You're impossible." "You're childish." Their coworkers secretly enjoyed the fights. One afternoon, after another argument, Aisha stormed out of the office. Brian followed her. "Why do you always take everything personally?" he asked. "Because you never listen." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." Brian became quiet. For the first time, he looked serious. "I actually respect your work, Aisha." She blinked. "What?" "You're talented." "I just enjoy annoying you." Aisha stared at him. Then she laughed. It surprised both of them. Brian smiled slowly. "There it is." "What?" "Your smile. I was starting to think you forgot how." Aisha immediately stopped smiling. A week later, heavy rain fell across Nairobi. Aisha got stuck outside a supermarket with no umbrella. She checked her phone. No Uber. No matatu. Perfect. Then a car stopped in front of her. The window rolled down. "Brian. Need a ride?" "I'd rather swim." Brian shrugged. "Suit yourself." He started driving away. "Wait!" Brian laughed and unlocked the door. Aisha entered the car carefully. The inside smelled like coffee and mint. "Thanks," she muttered. "You're welcome." Rain hit the windshield as soft music played in the background. For once, they were quiet. Then Brian spoke. "You know, you don't always have to fight me." "I'm not fighting you. You argue with me like it's your full-time job." Aisha smiled slightly. "You make it easy." Brian looked at her for a second longer than necessary. Something changed in the air. Something soft. Aisha quickly looked out the window. He started driving away. 2 days later, Aisha arrived home exhausted. As she climbed the stairs, she froze. Her ex-boyfriend Kevin stood outside her apartment. Aisha. What are you doing here? I came to talk. There's nothing to discuss. Kevin sighed. I made mistakes. You cheated on me. I said I'm sorry. You should leave. Before Kevin could answer, another voice interrupted. She said leave. Brian. Kevin looked annoyed. And you are? Her neighbor. This doesn't concern you. Brian stepped closer. She looks uncomfortable. That concerns me. Aisha looked at Brian in surprise. Kevin scoffed. Whatever. He glared at Aisha one last time before walking away. After he left, silence filled the hallway. You okay? Brian asked softly. Aisha nodded. Thanks. Brian smiled. Anytime. For the first time since meeting him, Aisha meant it when she smiled back. Before Kevin could answer, another voice interrupted. She said leave. Brian. Kevin looked annoyed. And you are? Her neighbor. This doesn't concern you. Brian stepped closer. She looks uncomfortable. That concerns me. Aisha looked at Brian in surprise. Kevin scoffed. Whatever. He glared at Aisha one last time before walking away. After he left, silence filled the hallway. You okay? Brian asked softly. Aisha nodded. Thanks. Brian smiled. Anytime. For the first time since meeting him, Aisha meant it when she smiled back. Their relationship slowly changed. The arguments became teasing. The teasing became conversations. Soon, they were spending time together without even planning it. One Friday night, the power went out across the apartment building. Aisha groaned. Great. A knock sounded at her door. It was Brian holding a flashlight and snacks. I come bearing emergency supplies. Aisha laughed. Come in. They sat on the floor eating crisps and talking. Brian told funny stories about his university days. Aisha laughed so hard her stomach hurt. You laugh differently now, Brian said quietly. What does that mean? It sounds freer. Aisha looked at him. The candlelight made his face softer. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Brian leaned slightly closer. Aisha's heart started beating faster. Suddenly the lights came back. Both of them moved away quickly. Brian cleared his throat. Well, crisis over. Yeah. The moment disappeared. But neither of them forgot it. The next week, Brian arrived home with a beautiful woman. Aisha saw them laughing outside. Something painful twisted inside her chest. She immediately hated the feeling. Why should she care? Brian was just her annoying neighbor. Nothing more. Later that night, she heard laughter from his apartment. She turned her music louder. A few minutes later, there was a knock. Brian stood outside. You trying to start a nightclub? Aisha crossed her arms. Thought you were busy entertaining your girlfriend. Brian blinked. My cousin? Aisha froze. Oh. Brian slowly smiled. Wait. No. You were jealous. I was not. You were. Aisha tried to close the door. Brian held it. Aisha. What? His expression softened. I like seeing you jealous. Her breath caught. Why? She whispered. Because it means maybe I'm not the only one feeling something here. Silence. Dangerous silence. Then Aisha gently closed the door and spent the entire night unable to sleep. A few days later, Brian invited Aisha to a Nyamachoma place with his friends. At first she refused. Then she somehow ended up going. Brian's friends loved her immediately. So you're the famous neighbor, one of them joked. Aisha frowned. Famous? Brian looked nervous. Don't start. His friend laughed. This guy talks about you all the time. Brian nearly choked on his soda. Aisha tried not to smile. The evening became warm and comfortable. For the first time in a long time, Aisha felt relaxed. On the drive home, Nairobi lights reflected across the windows. Thanks for tonight, she said. Brian glanced at her. You had fun? A little. A little? Okay, fine. I had fun. Brian smiled proudly. I knew it. When they reached the apartment building, neither of them moved. Then Brian spoke quietly. Aisha? I like you. Her heartbeat became uneven. I know. Brian laughed softly. That's your response? Aisha looked at him. I like you too. Brian stared at her for 1 second. Then he kissed her. Soft. Careful. Real. Aisha kissed him back before fear could stop her. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Wow, Brian whispered. Yeah. I've wanted to do that for months. Aisha laughed. You're dramatic, and you love it. Maybe she did. But maybe the biggest mistake Aisha made was believing everything was finally okay. Because love can feel perfect one moment and completely fall apart the next. As Brian and Aisha grow closer, new questions begin to appear. Why did Brian suddenly become distant? Why was he hiding things? And was Mercy really just Brian's cousin? Or was there more to the story? Sometimes, the people who make your heart feel safe are the same people capable of breaking it. And just when Aisha thought she finally understood Brian, one painful night changes everything. Will their love survive the truth? Or was this relationship doomed from the very beginning? Find out in part 2 of The Rival Next Door.